After Paul and Silas had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul went in, as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days argued with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Messiah to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, "This is the Messiah Jesus, whom I am proclaiming to you." Some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. But the Jews became jealous, and with the help of some ruffians in the marketplaces, they formed a mob and set the city in an uproar. While they were searching for Paul and Silas to bring them out to the assembly, they attacked Jason's house. When they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some believers before the city authorities, shouting, "These people, who have been turning the world upside down, have come here also. And Jason has entertained them as guests. They are all acting contrary to the decrees of the emperor, saying that there is another king named Jesus." The people and the city officials were disturbed when they heard this, and after they had taken bail from Jason and the others, they let them go. Where do you want to go for dinner? How do you want to wear your hair? You want to go out to the movies, or maybe we should go bowling? You want to go dance? Or maybe we should go to a comedy show? Which play at the Fulton would you like to go see this spring? Where do you want to go walking? Are you going to play softball or soccer this year? Questions. Questions that seemed so important just a few weeks ago. My elementary school had what they called a track meet. It was every spring. But what it really was a contest to see who could do the best at a variety of sports. Everything from marbles, yes, marbles, to basketball, to throwing a football, to jumping, to throwing, to push-ups. And every year, I would do pretty poorly. And it used to kill me because I love that stuff. It was really fun. But one year, I think it was in 5th grade, I put it all together. And I won. Partly because that's the year they added the push-up. You see, my dad's kind of the high priest of the push-up. He sees it as the essential exercise. And so, yeah, I kind of killed it on the push-ups. I made up for all my errant basketball shots, my really poor throwing, my 6-inch vertical jump, and I won. Okay, kidding about the 6-inch vertical. It might have been 7, but then the next year, I had a baseball game, and it was the same night as the track meet, and I couldn't defend my title. My first responsibility, as my parents rightly told me, was to my team. But I was heartbroken. The pain in my chest was unbelievable. My disappointment knew no bounds. And I guess for a kid, that's all fine. But in retrospect, it was pretty silly. It was the kind of thing that only matters when life is sweet, when all your needs are being met, and there's really little to look after other than your own immediate happiness. Kind of like, well, at least a little bit like the kinds of questions we were routinely asking ourselves a few weeks ago. Questions I know I, at least, would like to be able to ask again. Questions I think we now realize we were privileged to be able to ask. Right now, none of that seems so important. Yes, we miss it all. But when your mission is to try and get through the day and keep yourself and your family healthy, puts a lot of things in perspective. And I think it's a perspective we should try to have all of the time. We hear a story today about Paul and Silas. They're in this place called Thessalonica. And they begin a church there. It's the church that Paul will later write to in those books called 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. And what's hard to see here, and probably downplayed a little bit, but what definitely is happening, is Paul goes preaching to the Jewish folks there, but he doesn't have a lot of luck with them. Meanwhile, he gets a much warmer reception from what the text calls the devout Greeks there, and some of the women. This is a pattern, by the way, Paul is going to see throughout his ministry. Paul would typically enter a town, preach to his kinspeople about a Messiah who had gotten himself killed, which, as we all know, was not exactly the Jewish ideal of a Messiah, and then find he had better luck with the locals and with some of the women, as women were often largely ignored at this time in Judaism. And as for these locals, they were often very interested in the Jewish God, in Jewish culture, but they weren't completely Jewish because the men were not circumcised. And so Paul is really coming in with a different perspective, a perspective that says, when you get down to it, it's your humanity that's important. You are a child of God. God chooses you whether you're circumcised or not, which of course flew right in the face of Jewish culture. But that question, which seems so essential to the question of the Jewish faith, Paul makes it moot. Paul declares it unimportant. But of course, these questions don't die that easily, especially when people have built their lives and their faith lives around them, and when life is comfortable enough to make them seem like they're a little more vital than they really should be. There's a lot of shouting, accusations, a proclamation that these people are turning the world upside down. The world? Really? But the truth, even as Paul and Silas have to get out of Dodge, the truth is God's choice of humanity is reality. And that reality establishes the church of Thessalonica. We're being reminded right now of what's really important. And what's really important is not our political party, but rather that we're all Americans. What's important is we are at the same time called to care for and love this world. What's important is recognizing that all children are in a way our children. What's important is realizing that that call to love our neighbors as ourselves is real, no matter who they are. What's important is to recognize that there is a call from our God in the midst of this crisis, a call to rebuild this world into a more just, loving, accepting world. And hopefully, a world where we will be able to keep our perspective about what's really important, even as we hopefully get to ask those questions, those wonderful questions of how we're going to spend our time again. Keep loving each other. Keep loving your neighbors. Keep looking for ways to help. Pray for one another and for this land. Remember that our Messiah is walking every step with us. Peace.